Okay, friends, we're back. This is part 2 of our live stream for today. The previous one was about the Far East Economic Forum, also known as the Eastern Economic Forum, that happened in Vladivostok that I attended. But now we're going to talk about who the Russians want for president of the United States. Because at said forum, Putin surprised many by saying that he wanted for Kamala Harris to come out the winner of the presidential election. But ultimately, he also mentioned that it kind of doesn't matter because it doesn't change foreign policy much. But he put his bet down on Biden because Biden is predictable, and Harris is from the same camp, and she is also predictable. Trump kind of sarcastically said that he was deeply offended by this, but the way he said it, again, was very tongue-in-cheek and sarcastic, so I don't know. But let's take a sort of more serious look at this question, because in theory, you listen to this podcast. I'm always surprised that someone actually does listen to this, because you want this sort of insider information from someone who's worked deep in the Russian media, who knows a lot of these famous people, who knows how the news works here on the inside and out and all that. And so what do Russians actually think about this beyond Putin's sort of sarcasm and trolling that he's known for? Well, I can say one thing. When Trump was elected the first time, and especially when he got the nomination, but when he was elected the first time, there were parties in Moscow. Why? Because people were absolutely sure that there would be peace between the United States and Russia. You know, you can judge people only so much on what they say, because what they say doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter. But it's kind of what they do. And in 2016, or I should say, 2016, that would be right. When Trump won, the Russians celebrated. Not because he would somehow bring down the United States from within or serve Putin's interests as president, but because there would be peace between the United States and Russia, and we could have this wonderful best of both worlds that I used to enjoy, and many foreigners in Russia used to enjoy, which is gone now. The best of both worlds being, well, Russia can be wealthy and kind of part of the world, but it can also kind of develop on its own. And if you want to spend time in the West, you go there. If you don't, you don't. If you want to have an international brand and it would be in Russia or be in America, you can, that was Russia was integrated into the world, and a lot of people wanted to keep it that way. They enjoyed that integration. And even a lot of people who you might find very sort of patriotic and very right-wing or conservative even enjoyed that integration, especially if they had money. And kids who like to go to France. Excuse me. I'm still getting over being sick. But anyways, after all those years of Trump, there was a lot of disappointment. And only then you started to hear the Russian government, despite the fact that they could have been listening to any English-speaking analyst who lives in Russia. They could have been listening to someone like me, someone like Andrew Karibko, someone like Mark Sloboda would probably be one of the best people to listen to. Someone who doesn't live in Russia but would be a great person to listen to about foreign policy issues would be Joaquin Flores. Didn't listen to him either. Didn't listen to any of these type of people. Because, guys, for us, none of us, of this type of person, ever for a second believed that the Minsk agreement was worth anything, or that any agreement between Russia and the West had any value. But the Russian state sure did. And even when the whole Trump thing happened, I felt some optimism for America in terms of Trump. But the old adage of presidents change, but U.S. foreign policy remains the same, is a very powerful statement, and I knew it would sort of stay the course. So I wasn't very optimistic about the Trump period. But now the Russians are sort of finally bitter and once bitten, twice shy. They're sort of in that mode that they understand that it really doesn't matter who becomes U.S. president. But it is true that the one thing, and I think is good, because when Putin talks about predictability, there's the kind of thing I complain about how in Russian businesses, they always want everything to be predictable. If you talk to any Russian business person, they don't care what your idea is. They care that they'll get 120% of their money back in 6 months guaranteed. Okay, that's this obsession with stability and not taking risks can sometimes be very frustrating from the standpoint of being an American here. People here do not like risk at all. Very risk averse. But when it comes to the whole Kamala or Biden thing, it's kind of not just that. But I think it maybe some of the important people in Russia listen to this podcast because Russians, their greatest weakness is their naivete. Russians are very naive. We've talked about this before, so I won't go into it too much. And when you say we want Kamala, excuse me, to win, I think and on some level it's because she's so she's so obviously the enemy, so obviously anti-Russian, so obviously going to be in conflict with Russia, and is going to continue all these horrible, dangerous, nuclear war threatening policies that it eliminates. It basically means the Russians can't be naive. It turns their naive zone off because they can see that this is a clear and present danger. Trump provides hope, and sometimes he just provides chaos. And within chaos, maybe things could go good. Maybe things could be turn around. Maybe we could be friends. And that's when there's hope, and that's when Russian naivete can get turned back on. So I even think, so here's my problem. As an American, because I don't believe in accelerationism. Accelerationism being helping a problem become worse and worse to the breaking point, because after the breaking point it can be solved. I'm not an accelerationist. So as an American, what's good for America is Trump. Okay? Because Trump, even if you think he's a con man, or you think he is what he says he is, or he's somewhere in between, at least the narrative is better. At least he sometimes kind of does some stuff that's okay. He improved the economy temporarily. I'll put it this way. It's kind of, you have the choice between the policies that will just completely destroy the United States, especially the whole thing about giving legal immigrants a $150,000 home loan, pre-approved, government subsidized. That's going to hurt the United States bad. So stuff from Kamala's camp is definitely destroying the United States. So it's kind of like you have this choice between definite destruction and possible destruction. And so Trump wins, okay? If you care about the United States. If you look at the world through or the Russian lens, then Putin, despite the fact that he is a lot of times snarky and smiling when he talks about Western politicians, because of Russians' horrible weakness, their number one weakness, maybe not number one, maybe number one, it's a big one, their naivete, I have to agree with Putin on this one. Like, if Russia really does, because I've actually talked to some journalists about this, because people keep asking me more and more. Journalists are kind of like, well, if we had to back someone in America, who should we back? And unfortunately, because things have gotten so bad with the United States, that for Russia, they have to back the person that they have absolutely zero faith in, that they're absolutely disgusted by, so that way they won't be suckered in to a bad deal. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, maybe you know someone who's really naive, and if they meet someone who's a con artist who's wearing a suit and has very good manners, right? They could get suckered in. If they meet someone who's a con artist that looks like a diseased hobo, they might not even get suckered into a con because they're too afraid to talk to that diseased hobo. And that's what Kamala Harris is. She's the diseased hobo that's so disgusting to the Russians that her way of doing things, and this includes Biden. This isn't just like something because Kamala Harris is like Hindu or whatever. No. It's her, she's part of that Democrat machine, and she is deep in it. You know, I think Biden doesn't even believe half the stuff he says, but he's just in the Democrats, doesn't care, he's all about money. Kamala might actually believe some of this crap. But she is sort of that face of globalist, postmodern, woke nutsiness. And that is, for Russians, like staring at the face of a diseased hobo. And when you are looking at that type of person, you don't let your guard down, do you? So the Russian sort of side of me, the American side votes for Trump because Trump at least provides some kind of chance or better pro-human, pro-American rhetoric to be in politics. Trump's at least human, so there you go. And he provides some dice roll to maybe improve the United States. So my American side votes Trump. My Russian side got to go Kamala. 100% Kamala all the way, because the Russians can't be fooled by her. Not because she's she's too dumb or something, but because she just represents everything they hate in one package. Whereas, like I always say, the best Republican president ever voted in the office is Putin. I mean, Trump is a lot like him. Trump is sarcastic. He trolls people. He's louder. He's definitely louder. But sometimes there's quiet Trump. There's quiet Trump. He's out there. He's a little bit more bombastic. Maybe a lot more bombastic. But they're kind of a similar flavor of type of guy. They're not that different, right? And Kamala is a whole nother bag. So, anyways, despite the fact that Putin again said this particular statement full of sarcasm and snark, I think he means it. I think the Russian state actually is thinking that let's have Kamala just stay in there and let's see this thing through. I think Russia at this point is just ready to defend itself from U.S. foreign policy for the long term. Because if you remember, one thing to sort of take into account, people say a lot of things, but what do they do? Well, a lot of the people who've signed up to serve in the military, which is, I think over 1 million guys since the war started, the majority of them aren't fighting. They're still training. So some people say, well, obviously, Tim, that is because Ukraine is a giant territory, and they're going to be more like an occupation force that's going to spread all over Ukraine, and that's what those guys are going to be mostly used for. Maybe not even all of them. The rest of the guys might just go home and they'll be reservists. Maybe. But I do think that the Kremlin at this point is very concerned that the United States might see this war in Ukraine through, not just to the last Ukrainian, but to the last Finn, the last Pole, the last Romanian, the last German, and whoever else. I'm not quite sure if my heart actually believes that that's going to happen, but it's within the realm of possibility. I just shared that one tweet on this channel of one Finnish politician who's afraid that there's actually going to be some sort of shenanigans in northern Finland because they think that that's an undefended part of Russia. Because you know what? If you look at NATO, the Scandinavians are really expendable. I mean, aren't they? If you think about things from a globalist sort of NATO perspective. So, who knows? The Finns might be next on the chopping block. See, I always thought it'd be Poland because deep down, they hate the Poles as much as they hate the Russians, but they know that the Poles are valuable because of their geopolitical position. But maybe they hate the Finns even more. So, who knows? But because of this potential that NATO might see this thing through conventional war as long as they can until they finally break the Russian bear. The Russians are preparing for a long-term conflict with the West. And if you've ever heard, if you've listened, Putin never talks about when the war's going to end. Because it might not end anytime soon. So that's something to think about. And when you're in this kind of situation, again, back to predictability and all that, you'd want someone on the other side that is more predictable. Because if Trump provides some hope, maybe Russians will get suckered in. Anyways, guys, that's my spiel on that topic for today. I kind of didn't answer questions from the first topic, so we'll have a mix here. Let's see. Did anyone write in today? Maybe, maybe not. Very few people. If anyone wants to call in, you can raise your hand and call in. Christopher says, it's stormy internet weather, cutting in and out. Really? On my end? How is that possible it's cutting in and out? I'm sorry. They want a face-to-face, the best way to pass on a disease. Yeehaw. Yeah, I'll tell you what, when you collect people from all over the world, some of them are sick. And unfortunately, the hotel was one of those more modern hotels where the heating and cooling is blown in and the windows don't open. And the university that was there was built with the same construction logic. So you're just breathing in toxic air from people from all over the planet. Absolutely disgusting. I am pro-window. That's one of the reasons I live in Russia, because in Russia, traditionally, people just open the window to cool off, get fresh air. Anyways, Christopher continues. The new Russian airliner is meant to be a replacement for Boeing's dodgy 737 MAX. Okay. I'm not an airplane expert, so I can neither confirm that or deny it, but I believe you. US and EU elites will always consider Slavs to be, as you put it, snow monkeys. Yes, I usually actually say the snow N-word, but snow monkey sounds nicer. But yes, the powers that be, they trust me, in the European Union, anyone who is Slavic is garbage. The Finns, I'm not really quite sure how they relate to them, but their geopolitical position, okay, here's the problem. This is where you get into people who are retarded and their retarded way of looking at things. Now, one, if you're a Western person and you read about World War II in English, what are some things that you're going to read? Okay? You're going to read number one. The Soviet Union initially lost the war against the Finns. And that was very, very destructive for Russia. It was a major setback. Definitely caused some cracks within Soviet society. Number one. Number two, the Northern Front. The Germans pushed, but didn't really push very hard around Murmansk. And it kind of became a frozen conflict. Haha, pun, frozen, because it's very cold there. Okay, so you have these two pieces of information. So if you're a retard and you have a Solzhenitsyn view of Russia, you're going to think, aha, it was a mistake to attack through Poland. They should have attacked through Finland. They didn't use the right thing. It's Finland that's the key. That's where they should have attacked from, because the Soviets lost there initially, and then they were barely able to hold back a miniature Nazi force that was around Murmansk. Ha, that's the weak point of Russia. That's what we'll do this time. So I'm afraid someone cracked open their Wikipedia articles about World War II, and that's going to be their perspective of things. That's why I shared that tweet about Finland, not because I want to spread paranoia, but because it makes very logical sense when you know how people think, especially in an English-speaking country. Excuse me. Christopher continues. They are narcissists who expect Russians to shut up and obey. You're darn right about that one. And put up with broken agreements. Yeah, that's it. Because they literally, I think literally one of the main things about the West is their perception of Russia's, what's your problem? So what if we broke the deal? Who cares? Or that doesn't count. Whatever. Who cares? We're the hegemon. We're awesome. You should be like us. Might be my end for internet. I sure hope so. Not because I want you to have bad internet, but because I don't want to screw up. Finns consider Russia to be kind of dumb and born followers. Yeah, well, the Finns have been on the other end of the propaganda line for a long time. But if Finland attacked Russia, now with the Ukraine, is our guest, who I did see at the Far East Forum, Andrei Afanasyev, the reporter, he was there, I saw him. As he mentioned, one of the reasons the Ukrainians fight so well is because they're just Russians who are duped into not knowing they're Russians. The Finns are not. In fact, one of the reasons that the ancient Slavs expanded northward very easily and with very little resistance is that actually the Finno-Ugric peoples there were non-militant. They just sort of surrendered and assimilated. Finland is not really known for its warrior prowess, and we'll put it this way: the Soviet Union fought the war very sloppily. The Finns did a good job of fighting back. They still lost a lot of territory. They should be very proud of that victory as a culture. But if they try to invade Russia, because one thing, maybe they're part of NATO now, so they have Article 5 to protect them, but they're not brother Slavs. They're not Eastern Orthodox. If they, for some reason, were to attack Russia as not being part of NATO, not triggering Article 5, it's not going to be a special military operation. It's not going to be a nuclear war, but it is going to be a push-the-button thing. The Russians will just launch. And there's, 5 million people in Finland? There will be a lot less than 5 million within a 24-hour period. And that's how it's going to be. So I would really think they should really reconsider if they're actually the powers that be in Finland are actually planning on doing this, because they are going to be killed themselves. So, unless they can enact these plans from Ibiza, they can have some wonderful, gay strippers around, do some coke, launch from Ibiza, and everything will be fantastic. Bakani, hi Tim, sorry I'm late. Don't worry about it. I don't plan these live streams well. It's not your fault. It's my fault I plan terribly. But people watch them, which is always surprising to me. I don't know, does anyone want to call in? Anyone want to raise your hand and call in? No? Well, that's also kind of surprising. That's one thing that's different today. No one wants to call in. Usually there are. Anyways, I'll wait for the kind of final questions here. There's one question I need to ask. If anyone has any final questions, then for the day, then I'm going to go. I'll make the icons of these things, I'll upload them all, and we'll call it a day. How are you doing, man? Says Bakani. Do you think after Putin dies there will be a caucus rebellion? No. All they have to do is pick, Putin himself needs to pick a successor who has similar attitudes towards things as himself, and tell all the ethnic republics in Russia that I am carrying on what was done before. I am the successor, and I have no major plans for any major change. And that's it. That's all they want. That's all they want out of him. And that's it. So it's very simple. He has to give one speech before he gets elected that says, I am happy with most things here, and I'm not going to do anything to you. And that's it. So, nothing. Okay, guys, I guess that was the, here, Bakani. Because I'm kind of concerned about those radicalized caucuses, especially the Dagestanis. Concerned in what way? What are you talking about? You can radicalize anyone. Russia's fighting a war against radicalized Ukrainians. If you also remember, there were uprisings in Kazakhstan by some radicalized Kazakhs. The Georgians were, in a way, radicalized because they sent their army to genocide the Abkhazians and the Ossetians in 2008. People who I can speak to, many of them in Russian, who seem like normal people, were turned into genocidal maniacs in a very short time. But not as well as Ukrainians, because actually a significant number of the Georgian military actually gave up. Not out of fear, well, probably out of fear of dying to the Russians, but mostly because they were disgusted. They're like, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? So I'll tell you one thing. If you send people on a genocidal quest, you have to really kind of pump them up first. You can't just expect the average person to go in and murder civilians, because a lot of them won't. And so good on the Georgians, because apparently a lot of them just wouldn't. They're just like, no, we're not doing this. But a lot of them did. So, yeah. So, yeah, CIA-backed ISIS pukes as well, says Christopher. Yeah. So, really, what's the source of radicalization? Again, something Putin said is he said something like 90% of terrorism is funded by the deep state, or whatever term he used. I'm terrible with quotes, as you know. Sorry. Well, there you go. Once the global hegemon becomes a non-global hegemon, or regional hegemon, or Trump has his MAGA revolution, or whatever, if U.S. foreign policy changes, a lot of this stuff is going to go away. And, yeah, that's going to go away real quick. No funding, no mas. And that's it. Okay, guys, so sorry for my dour demeanor today, but I'm very sick, but it's already September 8th, and I have no videos on the channel for this month, I don't think. So that's bad. So anyways, I am going to be heading out of here. And Bakani says, maybe you're lucky to be in Russia. Actually, Bakani, yes, I am. And guys, one thing I've wanted to say for a while, and I'm going to start saying it, maybe I should close every live stream, is a lot of the people who are interested in the American Village have all told me, well, I'm going to do this next year. There's some things I need to finish up, and do this, and do that. Guys, it's getting real crazy out there, man. It's getting real crazy. If you want to move to Russia, you might want to do it sooner than later. In terms of the American Village, I know I told you guys to wait till we had something concrete. Now we have something so concrete that's being made out of concrete right frickin' now. Gotta move. Now is the time to strike. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in 2025? But anyways, Tim Kirby Russia, signing out.